All right, so we're going to dive into two different assessments and understand how we're supposed to be interpreting it. Our job is really just to find clues and see where things connect. So we could look at the overall score of 81, but in reality, we need to dive into each movement and know how that 82 or 81 per movement is going to go into it. So today we looked at overhead squat, single leg hinge, and lateral lunge. We're just gonna dive into overhead squat first. We can connect dots between movements, but let's try to connect some dots here on overhead squat. We're seeing that his left side is a lot less mobile than the right side, especially in the knees and the ankles. So then as we look into it further, compensations, we're seeing that they had good mobility or good stability of the knees moving inward, a little bit worse on the right side, but not enough to trigger. Insights, they had a lateral sway to the right, which wasn't too bad, and their stance width and depth were okay. So really we're trying to see how these two things connect between joints and compensations. I'm not getting enough clues here. So we could dive a little further down into single leg hinge. Now we're seeing left ankle stability here, which might also happen with the left ankle mobility. So that's going to be our first clue, and that's really what we're doing here. We're looking at clues alongside each one. We're seeing, like on compensations, okay, they had decent compensations, most likely because that they had not too much mobility of the hip on this one. They didn't get deep enough to go into that. So that's another clue. Okay, so I would ignore the fact that they got an 81% on compensations here because they really didn't get too far into it. The only thing I would look at, even with low mobility here, they still had their hip opening up. So that's another clue on that. So we're just diving in further from there. Decent knee stability, and then getting into the left side. This is likely the problem side for them. They were able to have the knee stability. We're seeing a lot worse things. So between just these two movements, between hinge and squat, we're already dialing in that they have some left side issues. And that's really going to be where we focus on next. And each one is going to be in a different plane. It's going to be in a different need. So as we get into lateral lunge, right side look good on ankle. Left side look good on ankle. So we're seeing that if they go with a lateral lunge movement in that frontal plane, they're not having those issues. So that's where we could really break down and really start focusing on where this might be. So this is just a really good example of how you're supposed to be interpreting the results. You're not supposed to get hung up by these overall scores. Those are just guiding principles. The real work is going into this and really trying to figure out what might be going on. At this point, that's when you could kind of go in and chat with Borelli. You could ask, hey, I'm noticing issues on the left-hand side. What is this telling us? And then try to connect some dots from there. Going into one other, let's go into one that's more upper body. So for this one, we did overhead push. So we saw a bilateral movement, and then we did a few joint comparison ones. So abduction and external rotation. Now, and internal rotation. And that's where we're seeing a lot of issues on there. Now, this client actually reported a previous rotator cuff injury. So we're seeing as he pushed through on this, not an issue on overhead press. Levels were good, so we'd go further down. Abduction, so he's able to raise it up. Now, it was on his left side, so he is able to actually achieve a little bit more mobility on the left side going up, a little bit less on the rotation, and then quite a lot less on the internal rotation. So that's a really good way to just kind of connect dots across all of these, because hey, you might get a good score on overhead push, and that's fine. Somebody with an injury is going to get good scores on certain things. So then we could just kind of move past this and really just try to dive deep into what actually is going on. Your job with all of this is just being a detective and investigating everything. And you have all this data points on each card at your disposal. So trying to move past these overall scores and these scoring is going to be your best friend to really just try to understand what's going on for your client.